the story of Eros and Psyche. Look at someone and behold a piece of art. To crave a person rather than a meal. That's my mischief and scheme. Affection and desire arrows fired, and two become one through love. I am the deity of sexual desire, love, and lust rendered flesh. I am the offspring of Aphrodite and Ares, the result of an adulterous union and a passionate love affair of beauty and violence. I am Eros, the son and servant of my mother, named after my older, the primeval deity, Eros. He represents the life impulse, the desire to reproduce. But I am the source of delight and pleasure in action. I incite mortals to lust. I build relationships, and I can just as quickly end them. In the end, the heart wants what it desires. I embody, want anarchy and entertainment. Mortals and gods submit to the will of my arrows, which my mother and I cherish. Our plots to shatter mortals are too entertaining to cease. What would the world be like without passion? And crazy deeds and great shows are the finest ways to demonstrate enthusiasm, and I take pride in my abilities. Using them to mock and make fools of everyone. Everyone must bow down to the power of love. I had considered myself above it, never to be bound by my own abilities. Oh, how mistaken I was. But love makes fools of us all, including the mighty Cupidus. It all began with a name whispered first among mortals, and later by nymphs and inferior deities. I ignored it because I was too busy making the God King fall in love with another mortal woman. But the name was repeated until it reached Aphrodite's dwelling. She lived in a palace near the ocean where she was born, the sea foam of Uranus on the earth, and seas, and she was temperamental, like the waves. Aphrodite, like crashing waves, rants on and on loud, and yelling, then silent, and repeating with the same pattern as the waves. She yelled to everyone who would listen about this mortal named Psyche. I hadn't seen Mother rant at people like this in a long time. Not since the nets that ensnared her with a lover, and not for an ordinary mortal. However, this Psyche had made quite a splash. All the inhabitants from her city, even mortals from other cities, came from far and wide to witness her famous beauty for themselves, dubbing her Aphrodite incarnate, the great goddess of beauty reborn. Psyche made no claims for herself, but it didn't matter, because she received all of the adulation and was robbed of the actual goddess. Aphrodite's temples and altars were abandoned barren and gathering dust. With mortal devotion gone, my mother ranted and raged, yelled, and cursed, piqued my interest. Who among mortals could compare? How gorgeous must Psyche be? To transfer nations, I thought. But my mother intervened, telling me to listen to her. Her jealousy frequently needs people to attend to it, and with the havoc she brings, I gladly comply. She directed me to seek out this Psyche, and I didn't need much convincing. Find the person who claims the name of a goddess, bring her down to her proper level, and punish her. I had to select the most nasty and disgusting guys and make Psyche fall in love with them. Aphrodite chuckled at her own cleverness, believing her idea was fantastic. The public would regard her love as a horrible sting and laugh, depriving her of the acclaim she had garnered and revealing her to be the humble mortal she is. A goddess could not love a beast. I smiled, hard laughed on cue, yet itched with curiosity. I flew out from my mother's territory just as twilight fell. I soared over the planet, reaching Psyche's home city. She was a princess, the youngest of three. Under the cover of night, I landed on her balcony's column and slid down into her chamber. I couldn't resist viewing her up close. I needed to witness the surprise. So gorgeous. It couldn't be, certainly. Mortality is no match for the divine. I moved gently to her bed, which was covered in soft material, like a canopy of leaves. I brushed one drape aside with the edge of my wing. I paused. What if she was ugly? And what if she truly exceeded the beauty of the gods? I drew back the curtain and took a deep breath as I looked at Psyche. She was more stunning than I had expected. It was a face worthy of the gods. Even while sleeping, she appeared to be an angel from another realm, something airy but banal, still human yet near to heavenly, close to perfection. I leaned in closer, my breath trailing over her skin. She jerked and shifted over in her sleep. I had to jerk back to avoid her body. Sharp, unexpected pain seared into my thigh. The transition was too rapid. My vision dimmed and my head swirled. As I glanced at Psyche again, she appeared to sparkle. Her flaws simply made her more attractive to me. I felt my painful leg and checked the wound. I gripped at an arrow stuck in my skin. One of my own love arrows from the quiver on my belt. I had positioned it incorrectly. A misstep sealed my fate. My pulse raced. The sight of Psyche made my blood pound and my palms sweat. A swarm of butterflies thrashed about my tummy. I dashed back to the balcony, taking one more glance at the mortal. My heart ached for the first time. The notion of leaving her gave me strange sensations, a twisting in my chest and a weight in my stomach. I didn't comprehend. I jumped into the night and took off. My wings carried me back to my valley, to my little palace. I was left to consider the situation I had put myself in. Cursed to suffer because I made others suffer with love. It all felt like too much. It just ached when I observed her from a distance, concealed among the crowds that had gathered to witness her. We all appreciated her attractiveness. She was appreciated by everyone from a long distance. Her elder sisters received stitches, proposals, and spouses. However, Psyche the youngest was unable to find her own partner, which was entirely intentional. I wouldn't allow it. Any man who came close Psyche quickly fell in love with other women. Matchmakers would come for an afternoon to see her and then reject any proposal the next day. Her father would exclaim about the ability of beauty to overwhelm, which must be the cause. Nobody could consider themselves worthy of becoming her match. But no mortal knew about the arrows that discovered her possible partners. My hand destroyed every fanciful idea, replaced by sincere love for another. And these men would gladly leave Psyche in the dust. So she was the last of her sisters left completely alone, for I couldn't stand the notion of her with another. The king worried. Psyche was anxious, and the kingdom was scared. If Psyche was unable to make a mate, it was the gods' will, and they were displeased. They went to an oracle because they were afraid of the penalty and wanted a solution. I followed them. I had long forgotten my mother's commands. I was fixated on my own ambitions. They went to the oracle of Mythology, an Apollo worshipper and disciple. Had the gods been angry when Psyche and the king sought for answers on whether she would ever marry? What was to become of Psyche? The oracle's response was entirely composed of Apollonian phrases. He is not a buddy of mine. My unrequited love tactics were never intended to be amusing, but rather to incite wrath. He revealed her fate through the mortal's tongue. Psyche must be dressed for marital fear and put on a high mountain rock. Abandon all hope. One of mortal stock will be your son-in-law, for she will marry a savage, barbaric, snake-like creature. He who flitted on wings overhead made everything smart, plaguing every moving thing with agonizing darts. Zeus must be afraid. Other gods' terrors are revealed to him, and rivers shiver in the terrible depths beneath. Psyche stood transfixed with the realization of her fate. The king gasped and clutched his kid. He knew she was doomed to the underworld. The river remains in Hades, but I was a jumble of feelings and ideas. The realization that she may be mine, that fate had planned something for us. Her unjustified dread of me made me angry, all because Zeus casts me as a villain with his words. Zeus does not fear me, although he is frequently frustrated. But I know he adores the hunt and chase, and I can be a shield, which is a wonderful justification to work with Hera. He is amused and enjoys the experiences I provide, but smart, snake-like beast. For I am known to lie and do my mother's nasty bidding, the serpent that directs desires away from commitment. His nasty statements, however, contained truth. She was immortal, whereas I was a god, winged and heavenly like a man, yet much beyond. What hope was there for us? She would die as Apollo predicted. Our destiny were connected. Her blood would be on my hands, whether she lived another year or 80. Relationships between mortals and gods seldom end happily. I see that every day. I would be compelled to see her death. He took his dislike for me and used it to terrorize the unfortunate people. As I soared away, my thoughts strayed farther. Before death, we'd have to meet. I saw myself as a mortal girl before the god of love. When she saw my face wings and the radiance of my divinity, she would fall on her knees and adore me as all mortals do to gods. What hope do I have that she will see past it? Seeing me, people have admired my beauty since I was born. I have dazzled both gods and mankind. My bow and arrows, as well as my torch, will help me light up the world around me with love. They all tumble over each other, driven by passion. And that is all I have ever experienced or felt. Desire not love. Psyche would see me and get filled with it. However, I did not want it. I didn't want to look into her eyes and see wonder, the dedication of a child gazing up, and the terror in the margins that never went away. She would recognize the god of love Eros, but not me, the man behind the beautiful art. It made me feel ill to my stomach. I would not have her see me as described above. I'm bored of being at the top all the time. Desire that is not fulfilled. I wanted to know her and have her know me. Truly outside the hierarchy of the cosmos, we are not bound by our placements in the world. Beauty is often regarded as a blessing, yet it may also be viewed negatively. Constant deception and sycophants. They will say anything to gain acceptance and the possibility of becoming romantic. There is no real link. Even when she stated she was happy, she might get envious and enraged at the notion of the devotees and followers. My own power in the world, as well as the demands of my profession, generate passion. To be kept away from her out of obligation, how could a mere human consider herself worthy of comparison? I didn't want to bother her or make her feel bad. I thought she would never tell the truth, would become a liar, never revealing her true colors, and would constantly attempt to appease the great god of love. I didn't want her modified. I did not want her to be terrified. I didn't want another liar. Psyche and her family planned for her wedding. but everyone in attendance was sad. Yes, she was being sent to her death. The royal procession combined the tangible aspects of a wedding march with the atmosphere of a burial. Everyone who joined and followed her was quiet, somber, and solemn. As they strolled, they attracted hundreds of thousands of mortals, citizens, and devotees. Many people held candles and mumbled prayers for Psyche. They weren't so forlorn. They looked dismal as they marched up the mountain. But I was looking forward to their farewell. I observed from the cloudy sky above as the swarms of lights dispersed as if to leave her alone. Instead, they gathered around her. Her limbs stood tall, and her head remained up. She exhibited no fear as she faced the towering rock wall and the black pit below. She consoled her parents, who were weeping. It simply made them cry harder, hugging one another as she let go. She hugged her sisters and smiled hard at the onlookers. Intimate with her sisters, but aloof and friendly to others. Through the danger to her own life and the prophecies of its end, Psyche concentrated on everything around her. I observed it all while seated on a rocky ledge, hidden from mortal eyes. They all quickly left, and the flashing lamps faded away like fireflies on the horizon. She was alone at the time, and her worry became apparent. She wrapped her arms about herself in the frigid air. She let herself to shiver and get smaller. Her body collapsed in on itself. Her fierce look faded when the lights went off and the darkness fell. Her firm shoulders began to tremble, and her eyes explored the darkness as she began to cry. That's when I sent the winds. Zephyrus, the powerful west wind, approached her. His air, imperceptible to mortal eyes, enveloped her, elevating the train of her colorful garment playfully. I made sure he was nice and did his best to calm and relax her. He told her to trust him to walk into the air, and he would catch her and securely transport her to her new home. She wiped her tears, but all she could see was the darkness below. She couldn't see anything, with her eyes far below the clear cliff face, a huge plunge. I could see her hesitation, her lovely feet pulling her back, her eyes trying to find anything in the abyss. I'm sure she was looking for a beast to emerge, but she then concentrated on the horizon, the faraway city, and the family that could be punished. She took a deep breath before closing her eyes. I was afraid she'd go back to the city alone, but she plunged from the cliff. Zephyrus captured her with his winds and gently lowered her to the earth. She couldn't sense or see the divine in my valley or castle, but she could hear their whispers. The majestic house with expansive landscapes, wildflowers and meadows bathed in beautiful, bright sunlight. She investigated it all, taking a morning walk amid the flowers. When she got weary of viewing the butterflies about midday, she turned towards the home. Her initial steps inside left an echo on the mosaic floors. My invisible attendants were sounds that sounded like melody and bells, nicer than mortal voices. They all received her with the warmth I had requested, but they enjoyed the new presence. Psyche was taken on a tour of her new home, and my staff greeted the new lady of the house and showed her about her modest kingdom. True, I want to wow her and show her the gift, not the curse. She was not a prisoner or a sacrifice to a beast, but a very welcome and appreciated visitor. I thought this would calm her anxieties, provide some consolation in the aftermath of her prophecy, and reveal the truth about my intentions. However, it overpowered her. She looked for the source of the sounds. She hurried from room to room, confused and scared. My attendants soothed her down with music. They drew her a bath and left her in the warm water. I had planned a lavish meal of various cuisines and flavors to learn about her favorite foods. I spoke to her for the first time, my voice deep but gentle, resonating around our little chamber. "You're welcome, Psyche. You are now the lady of the house as fate decreed. Relax, put your mind at peace. Nobody will hurt you. Let the bath warm you. And whenever you become hungry, there will be a feast below. Whatever your heart wishes, we will try to make in the master of this mansion. I wish you no harm, and we'll meet at nightfall, after the light has left the valley. I'll come to you and explain everything." I then moved from the valley and traveled throughout the world. I made sure that my task was not overlooked. As I flew, reuniting lovers and beginning exciting encounters, my thoughts lingered on Psyche. I sped through my regular mischief, ignoring all of my customary pleasures. I sailed loops above my own house, waiting for the final rays of Apollo's chariot to go. When Nyx, the blanket of darkness, crept over me, I dashed to my own balcony. But as I approached her apartments, I paused. What if she, like the others, admired my attractiveness, but didn't actually see me? I was surrounded by sycophants and flatterers, human vanity, and the vapidity of my mother's court. It felt overwhelming and stifling to be adored just for my attractiveness. I wanted more. I wanted to trust her. As I entered her room, I turned out all the lights with a thought. In the darkness, I asked Psyche if she would let our love grow unhindered or constrained. I asked her to obey some norms as a man and wife. She would have her every need met without having to struggle or worry. I promised to love her with every fiber of my existence, and if she agreed, we'd be happy. We would be faithful and equal to one another under one simple condition. She and I would only meet in the dark, and she would never know my real name or face. Before she talked, I emphasized that I would tell her everything except the superficial, the insignificant, but that every idea, want, and wish for my future, our future, and anything else she wanted to know would be hers, with the exception of my name and face. She would recognize the real guy beneath. She appeared calm, but suddenly her expression plummeted. In the absolute black, I could see all of her expressions, yet she hid nothing. She thought I couldn't see, but I watched her dread resurface in the form of perplexity. I grabbed her hand in mine and let her feel my flesh. No scales or huge claws, just human hands. We sat in complete darkness together, only feeling each other's hands. The energy she created with each brush of her skin on mine was unlike anything I had ever felt. We traced the lines on each other's palms, little scars on her thumb from cutting flowers with stolen knives when she was younger, and caresses from the dozens of arrows I'd shot from my bow. We spent virtually the whole wedding night talking and learning about one another, starting with basic things like our favorite cuisines and flowers. I told her about my modest, inconsequential love of honeyed dates. I called them the finest meals on the planet. She disagreed. I fell for her more when she talked about her appreciation of basic fruits. She said they were way preferable to a date. Nobody has openly disagreed with me in so long. It was both invigorating and intoxicating. Our chats flowed effortlessly. Each giggle I drew from her caused my face to warm. I never blushed, but she coaxed them out of me. Before daylight, she had leant forward and kissed me, a whispered agreement, a commitment to be mine, and we melded together as one, confirming our link as husband and wife before moving on to party the valley. I flew from our balcony while she slept comfortably and blissfully. This was how it was for a while marital bliss. Psyche would spend her days in the valley, the voices tending to the home, amusing the mortals with my antics of love and passion, and revealing my face at my mother's court, bonding with my wife late into the night. My Psyche's face is only the beginning of her beauty. I knew about her spirit, her wit, and her unwavering kindness and empathy. Everything made me love her more. But she became silent and sleepy. Despite being surrounded by the heavenly, she could only hear, not see, or touch them. Her bright and joyful personality began to fade. Her laughter was shorter, and I heard less of the melodious music I had grown to like. Her questioning skirted the taboo themes, and she desired my company more. Why must I depart every day at Helios's sunrise, unable to sleep at night due to her loneliness? I hadn't considered it then. She yearned for friendship and spoke of old recollections. More frequently, stories about her home, the kingdom full of lovely people, her father and mother and her elder sisters, from when they were little fighting toddlers to the adult ladies they were. But now I understand. Her spirit was troubled by homesickness. She was happier. When she spoke about those days, a brightness returned to her, but she quickly faded away. Her restless thoughts drifted. She'd think aloud. What became of them now? Did they grieve her? Day after day, night after night, I directed staff to bring her a variety of treats, including delicacies, wines, books, and artwork. They played music and brought her animals to keep her company, including horses for the fields and a few dogs to make noise in the halls. I brought a swarm of butterflies to awaken her at morning. They were her favorites. They had never failed to put a grin on her face in all the years I had known her. But it wasn't enough. She still longed for her previous home. That night, she did not laugh or grin. I worried I had lost her. But she came to me that night as apprehensive as the first. I hadn't seen her like this in quite some time. I coaxed and dared her to confess her wants, promising to do whatever was in my power. She was my delight, and I longed to see her bright and cheerful. My darling, I've spent every day trying to be happy. You offer me so much delight, but I cannot help but feel dissatisfied. There are many treasures in our home, but the invisible servants make me feel lonely. Every night I am overjoyed to be at your side, but every morning it seems so empty. And in that quiet, I have plenty of time to contemplate. I think about all I've left behind: my family, my sisters, and the city. They all assume I am dead mauled by a beast, or worse. I can't take the notion of their pain being wasted when I'm perfectly well. I wish I could relieve their misery. I considered writing to them, but they would never believe ink from flesh. They had left me alone, and they would need to see my face to realize I was actually well and alive. I ask you for a method to notify my folks that I am safe, even pleased, and that my restless heart will be at peace once more. I was concerned about the potential harm that mortals may cause, but I saw no reason to reject her. Despite her inability to see, her dark eyes penetrated my spirit. Her stare lingered above my eyes where she suspected they may be. I couldn't pass up any opportunity to relieve her misery. I permitted her to depart because I saw this as a chance to test her allegiance. My Psyche had never indicated a desire to leave me, and she had never been given the opportunity either. I wondered if she would accept the opportunity to depart. My love was no prisoner, yet the wind could not transport her over this valley with its stone walls enclosing all within it. With this, I authorized her to visit her sisters. I promised her I'd summon them to the cliffs above, and she'd be carried by the winds to meet them where she'd get her opportunity. I knew I shouldn't test her, but my mother's influence obscured my eyesight at the time. Psyche was my first love. I needed to know whether she was telling the truth. This would be a modest step toward proving it was. I called servants before daybreak to write letters to the sisters telling how Psyche survived and yearned to see them, and we agreed to meet at the cliffs the next day. I informed Zephyrus of his instructions to be cautious and attentive, despite having my eyes everywhere. I was frightened when I left her in the early light. I flew with knots and weight in my belly, which dragged me down all day. I circled the palace, and Zephyrus approached me, whispering about what he had heard, the most disturbing being the remarks shouted as they departed. He observed them leave my house wearing nice gowns and expensive diamonds that my wife had given them as gifts. Not a problem, but the scowls on their faces when she departed were. My anxiety rose as Zephyrus proceeded. The sisters chuckled at Psyche's stories. She is certain that her spouse is a deity. They'd heard the murmured conversations, seen the splendor of our abode, and felt the breezes sweep them. They were not idiots. Their tones revealed a sneering divide, and they grumbled about their own aged and ill spouses. They couldn't tolerate it. The youngest daughter had lived and had a better life than them, bitter and petty, filled with terrible language. They insulted my wife and hid the money in her pockets so that no one would know about it. What a magnificent life and prosperity. If everyone still thought she was dead, talked on about her, spoke of her prophecy and her impending death. They appeared to desire it, but Zephyrus could no longer hear their shouting, just false tears as preparation for their parents. I flew to the balcony without speaking to the royal breezes. I was panting by the time we were on our way. I walked into the passageways, searching my chambers first, then hers. I got increasingly agitated as I searched for her. She hadn't departed. She was vomiting into a bowl in the kitchen. I waited for her to return to our rooms, where the darkness would conceal my features. When she returned, I assisted her into our bed and applied a cool compress on her forehead. She reclined on the bed and I lay next to her. I placed my hand to her back and stroked circles to relieve her agony. Even in the dark, she sparkled for me. I moved her hair away from her face, and she leaned into my touch. Her cheek brushed across my palm. My side was relieved, enjoying in the tranquility before the clouds appeared to her. We were heading toward a storm. I spoke to her gently. "Psyche, I love your sisters." "Yes, my love. I can't thank you enough. It has been a great comfort to see them, embrace them, and soothe all of my longings. It's as if a weight has been removed from me. I can breathe now, knowing that there is no more grief. They will inform mother and father about our happy union. The only issue now is this odd illness. I'm content to know you as you are. It no longer bothers me to be in the dark and unable to see your face. I take comfort and pleasure in knowing that you trust me, and for that I love you even more." I wished to hear this from her lips and assured her, "Yes, I trust you, my butterfly. I cannot take your family away. This has done you good. I see it, but you need to listen to me. You could love them, but you can't trust them. Don't let their remarks influence you. They do not share your joy of heart as I do. You must believe me. They know nothing. The breeze detects their actual intention. I will not repeat their comments, but have trust in me, and everything will be well. Allow me to hug you and soothe your anguish. But my dear, I know my sisters. We are of the same bloodline. They've known me all my life. We were girls together. They would never wish evil on me. Whatever the wind said, Lord Zephyrus must not have comprehended. They have keen mouths to protect their delicate hearts. As my father always said, it is not in my heart to lie, and it cannot be in theirs. It's beyond my imagination. I'll speak to them myself. Everything will be evident. They will have been jokes, merely jests, and everything will be well again. You'll see. Believe in me during our time in darkness. I no longer have nightmares or feel oppressed by the night. For you are the light to which I cling, yet I have not been firm. Trust in me. Psyche, your own, loyal and devoted companion. I believe in you, my love, but I wish you lived 2 lives. I am aware of the cause of your illness. You are with a youngster. I hear its heartbeat. I place my palm against her abdomen. She put her hand on mine and squeezed my fingers. She leaned up and kissed me with a grin. In her embrace, I could feel her tears on my cheeks. I had forgotten all of Psyche's sisters because I was so shocked and overjoyed. The storm was not in the horizon as I had expected. It was already here, and I was instructed to call the Viper's family. But I had no idea of the dreadful events that would unfold or their role in them. I should have noticed the indications in Psyche the night following their second visit. She froze beneath my palm, her muscles strained and her heart beating. It was all there, but I couldn't see. I imagined them as her nurse, the enormous burden of motherhood and the terror of it all weighing on her. I admit that I assumed we were both feeling the same way. I was terrified about the new life ahead of me and how I would disappoint my child. But my excitement distorted my judgment. I assumed she was excited to be man and wife, and she sank into my kiss as she usually did. We had a loving passion, and after our embrace, we held each other motionless. The pleasant night air was full with lovely flowers, and I went fast asleep. I dreamed about my child, but I was awakened. My eyes sprang wide from the intense agony. As a burning light reached them, I felt my shoulder hurt. I heard the sizzling and smelled the burning oil before seeing anything. It combined with golden ichor blood. It flowed out of my skin. When my eyes adjusted to the bright light, I noticed Psyche standing near me. Her eyes gleamed brown with golden specks, a hue I'd never seen before. Her cheeks were flushed pink, and she stood nearly motionless. I looked down and saw that Psyche was holding a bright oil lamp in one hand and a long silver knife in the other. I felt my insides shatter like glass. I pulled the light from her grip, ignoring the ache in my shoulder with a scorching wrath. Fire erupted near us, and I hurled it on the stone floor. It smashed into a swirl of broken glass and sparkles. Flames engulfed the wooden frames, and the loudness jolted Psyche from her statue position. I grabbed my hand around her wrist before she could blink, ripped the knife from my grasp, and tossed it across the room. It landed in the center of a solid rock wall with a fracture. She trembled and slid to the floor as I let go. I approached the blade, still shocked, but it remained embedded in the rock. I remarked then, "After everything I've done and given you, I've asked you for so little, and you can't even do that. You vowed to me, and I loved you deeply. For that, you attempted to murder me in our own bed. I should murder you because of this. You attempted to kill your own husband. Even so, I can't injure you and will not kill you, but I can't forgive this treachery. I warned you, Psyche. I told you to believe in me, but you did not. You swear to me, but it means nothing. I hope you are pleased with your finding, since you now understand what you have lost forever. You will live and mourn your losses. That is greater punishment than death. I lifted my wings, but I could feel the oil burn through the feathers. My left wing is scorched and bleeding. I pressed on. I fluttered toward the balcony over Psyche's head. My clumsy wings dipped low, allowing Psyche to clutch my leg. She begged and placed her tear-stained cheek against my calf, but I couldn't hear her above the storm. Waves of emotion washed over me as gods feel more deeply than humans. I soared out the window above our house over the valley. My flight was unpleasant since Psyche was on my legs and shaking. I couldn't stand to look at her. On I flew. My uncontrolled flapping had moved beyond my control. I plummeted low in the air toward the treetops. I shook my legs. Pain ravaged my wing, but Psyche's grasp broke. She fell for a little period, and the tree branches caught her. I soared on the faint echo of her screaming in my ears. Their piercing sound has been with me ever since, and I will not forget it. Even if I concentrate, I can feel my ears ringing with sound. I just thought about it as I flew towards a spot to rest and cure my burns. My wing is injured, and my heart is crushed. I returned to my mother's dominion in grief. My spouse abandoned me in the treetops. I had to crawl down through the tears which rocked my body. All I could do was hope to wake up, since this had to be a nightmare. He left me alone. My mind was still reeling from the reality of who he was. It cannot be true. I strolled to soothe my anxiety, following the path he went through the heavens on foot. I went on and on, weeping out my sadness until all of my tears had dried, but I did not stop. I went with my thoughts, for no one realized the extent of the mistrust my sisters had sowed. How their remarks clung to my thoughts and tainted my recollections of my hubby. I must explain why I stood over him that night with the lantern and blade. The oracle's prophecy has tormented me ever since. When I first met Eros, he was both a voice and a shadow. I was relieved. He didn't appear to be the monster that was predicted. I allowed myself to pretend it was not real. The oracle had misconstrued fate's intention. Even though they discussed my death, they warned that he would be the reason. I allowed myself to forget. I want to fall into all of his lovely words and loving embraces and feel protected. The night resembled hopes and dreams. My days began with adventures, walks in the countryside, afternoons in the meadows with the most beautiful flowers, feasts at dawn, noon, and evening. All far better than any mortal feast, including that of my royal father. It was a relief to tumble into darkness and be softly carried to a new existence. I had considered myself destined to Hades. I had bid goodbye to my previous existence. Few people get the chance to do that. However, the expression in my parents' eyes and the sadness on my sisters' faces stayed ingrained on my consciousness. Even among the masses, there were expressions of sympathy, regret, and empty resignation. Everyone is unable to stop it. They had marched me to my death. I did not forget the large throngs who came for me, but they dispersed before my family. Their last stares had terrified me. I then reflected on their futures and how I will never know them. Despite the long days of nonstop talk in my new home, I found myself still empty. My days looked useless, and the evenings were my sole source of solace. I missed the genuine presence, the weight of another person in the same room as you. When daylight came, I assigned myself duties. I took a few days to explore a new area of the valley, collect fruits and flowers till my limbs hurt and my baskets were loaded to the brim. Even reading and playing instruments in a vast music room provided no comfort or happiness as it had before. The creatures that Eros gave me brought me some comfort. My days were significantly more occupied with their presence and the care necessary. I needed a diversion while feeding and walking, and he was aware of this. I came to adore them. Bucks and meows horses that led my research beyond, but always within the valley. Nonetheless, I thought about my family. I wondered what they were doing. As I ate breakfast, I remembered how my sisters fought over dishes. At dinner, I wondered if they ate my mother's favorite soup of the season, or if she had discovered a new favorite one I wouldn't recognize. I envisioned them in the dining halls, with me eating alone in the numerous vacant chairs at the large table. What became of them? What had happened to my family's city in the kingdom? The sparks from my father's sleepy eyes were the worst. To see his pain, the toll my fate had exacted on him. For weeks it ate away at me. Despite my efforts to push it away, the diversions of my loving spouse and the numerous needy animals did not stop my thoughts. I felt increasingly alone. I started to staying in my chamber and sleeping all day. The weight of it had taken over me, tired by the perpetual dread of my family's unknown destinies and their unawareness of mine. I wallowed and felt the disease develop. Breakfast never lasted in my stomach long. More fatigues, odors and tastes were all intense and inappropriate. The vomiting cycles felt horrific. My days were the worst, but my nights were not as horrible. But was it due to the symptoms or my husband's reassuring warmth? He'd stroke circles on my back, but by dawn light, I was always alone, and it only added to my desire for home. My parents' nurses and just one other person from home sat with me. The unseen voices were all beautiful, yet unearthly, making the place feel more vacant. This is why I ask my love to let me disclose myself to my sisters, to alleviate the dreadful cloud of suffering that was choking me so. He always treated me with love and understanding. This was no different. The day they arrived, they oohed and awed as I showed them my domain. The vast scenery, the magnificent home, and the invisible staff. It blew them away, but I was simply happy to see them. I didn't see their lingering gazes on the gold that adorned the artwork surrounding us, the splendor of the location. But I noticed a hollowness in their features. I don't remember any lines being heavily worn on their skin. I had assumed it was my fault that my loving but sharp elder sisters were concerned. Their sadness had disfigured their cheeks, but after our visit, they appeared so warm and bright. They embraced me fiercely farewell, and I finally got the relief I had been looking for. I saw Zephyrus's winds bring my sisters back up and returned gladly to my house. I had skirted their queries with necklaces and jewelry. Some fantastic short tales about my young hunter husband who was constantly abroad with his bow and arrows in the hills and forests during the day. When they returned, I was overjoyed to convey the good news, unwilling to accept my husband's warning. They were overjoyed with my good news. The two of them were overjoyed to be able to adore their niece or nephew, and they wondered if the child would be like me, its mother. Perhaps gifted with beauty, they dazzled me with the words I wished for identifying my best characteristics. I listened attentively. I was an idiot, and they were weakening my defenses. They spoke about the attributes the lovely creature would have and the characteristics my spouse might pass on to the child. I attempted to distract them with colors for their nursery. They discussed the fashionable new trends in their own kingdoms, striving to outdo one another. As they debated, I considered an answer to their query. How could I know? Would I see pieces of my unknown husband's face within my child's? Will he allow it? What would happen to us, our lives? Will he truly just arrive at night and go by dawn? Will our kid ever know their father in light? Or will we continue to spend this half-life in darkness? My sisters laughing interrupted my idle musings. They had began their normal boasting about their respective kingdoms and spouses. They discussed their wealth and status as well as the prosperity of their people. They then turned towards me. They inquired as to my good fortune. They questioned how long my fortunes would last. But in my absence, they had long considered the oracle's predictions. Imagining the ugly beast depicted, they were relieved to hear about my attractive young spouse. For I had not described a snake with wings, and they could see with their own eyes that I was secure at least from him, for he was only a guy. Then they returned to their favorite topic themselves. I can see it all more clearly now. But then, I was overjoyed by their warmth, the comfort of family. They continued to talk, but I was overcome with terror of the unknown. I was aware that we had chatted for quite some time, but I was concerned. Did I know my spouse well enough? What about our child? What if the prophecy was correct? Perhaps this is how he will murder me. What if he was a hideous beast to look at, and a monster was developing inside me as well? But out of all the nights I knew him, he had been nice. What's the rationale behind that? But my sisters gasped and explained, which knocked me back. What about the beast around the mountain? Had I seen the beast like they had? I couldn't grasp the sentence and stumbled out. What kind of beast? What creature? Where they spoke after the gusts had pushed them to the cliff edge. They saw it. A wicked and diabolical creature. Leather wings, claws, and scales. A snake tail slithered behind it as it descended down the mountain and into the valley. Its crimson eyes missed their escape, so they raced as fast as they could. My sisters consoled me as I felt blood draining from my face. My mind whirled, and I blurted out a confession to them as they sat by me handing out tissues and caring for me. I said, I don't know my husband's real name because we only met at night. They jumped back and gasped again before bursting into shrill screeches, mocking me. How could you have lied to us? Psyche, how can you be pregnant by a man you don't know? How do you know he's not a hideous creature? A wrinkled, elderly man, an unattractive, greasy teenager, or perhaps the monster creature with wings and a tail. The monster wants you to stay here so you do not escape. He intends to fatten you up and let his monster progeny devour you from the inside out. It might tear you in half before you give birth. I grieved as they stopped, and with snivels and tears on my cheeks, I attempted to convey that he had been nice to me. However, they had stated that it was all part of his scheme. You must fight back and protect yourself, Psyche. Conceal an oil lantern and a firearm. You cannot confront a beast alone. When he sleeps, turn on the lighting to view the giant plane in front of you. Strike him as he sleeps. Kill the beast before it kills you. Do you not recall the oracle's words? Your fate was well stated. You've forgotten, and he'll be your end. alter your fate, Psyche. Perhaps you can save your child. It is his destiny to be your downfall. Don't let him deceive you. Save your child. You must be brave. They knew I could be. Oh, those terrible words. They caressed my hair and kissed my cheeks. They had stirred up a storm in my head. I was going over everything and trying to find fault with him. And he warned me not to believe my sisters. What if he realized they'd seen him? What if this is part of his plan? To turn me against my family and never escape as his monster develops. I had allowed myself to forget the prophecy. That rings true. And it was my fuel. I could no longer sit in the dark. The life of my child. What was their fate if he were the love I'd known? If it were true that he was unattractive or elderly? That's something I could live with. I admired the man I had grown to know in the dark. I didn't care what he was doing in the light, but I couldn't tolerate a monster. I wanted to think my sisters would never hurt me, but I was mistaken. When the time came, however, I had to know. I turned on the lamp and held it up to my sleeping husband's figure. First, I saw his white and delicate wings, feathers that gleamed in the light from the oil lamp. I'd never felt them, never knew or imagined he might have them. My stomach fell as I looked farther. His wings were stunning. However, they were still wings. What other horrific bits might I find? Fear rushed through me, and I held the dagger hard. But then I noticed skin. There are no scales, simply regular tan skin, a human body, and a wonderful face. The most attractive dude I'd ever seen. His lips were soft, and he smiled peacefully. I took a step forward, and anguish surged through my spirit. The room began to slide away from my vision. A warm cloud hung over my gaze. I looked down and saw an arrowhead, inside pricking at the sole of my foot. It had come loose from the quiver on the floor. Next to it was a golden bow, and I knew he was a deity. This was Eros, Aphrodite's son and god of love. I gazed at Eros, my husband. The light appeared to come from him now. My gut exploded with butterflies. My head raced, and the love in my heart only grew. It tore through every fiber of my existence. And how relieved I felt. The sheer delight of learning that the man I loved in the dark was a man. His attractiveness wasn't the real treasure. However, my child's safety was of paramount importance. My recollections were no longer contaminated by dread and mistrust. I had loved him in the darkness, and the emotion I felt now burst. I surged at Eros in a daze, acting solely on impulse. But I still had the oil light in my hand, and it spilled. Burning hot oil was tossed across the bed, spilling on Eros. His shoulder and wing were covered, and I froze. His eyes jerked awake. You're aware of how this ended, how he responded to my betrayal, vulnerability, and terror. I attempted dropping the dagger, but he grabbed it before I could. My pleading did not persuade him. My cries and tears did not faze him. He left me alone in the forest on the tree. From then, I fell into despair. He was correct. I was an idiot and had wrecked everything. But did he ever really ponder the future? What about the future of our child? I couldn't understand why such a gorgeous face was hidden. I was merely perplexed then, upset and indignant, frustrated and despairing. I sobbed over what I had lost, pregnant and alone. I climbed down the tree crying as I walked, until I could no longer walk. I sat there crying myself to sleep. I awoke to the early light numb, but restless, and moved on. I came to a brook and sat down. Strangely, a satyr playing a merry melody enticed a nymph to the other shore. She danced while he played the flute. I turned aside, but I stepped into the sea. First waves touched my toes, freezing cold, but I didn't move. I kept going until I was waist deep in the river, ready to be swept away. But the satyr yelled my name. I did not inquire how he knew it. He had stopped playing and reached the edge. He coaxed me back onto the bank. After some time, I'm embarrassed to acknowledge, but I fell on the ground beside him and cried again. He took the time to comfort me, and with a soft voice like oak wood, he restored my faith and encouraged me to keep going, to seek Eros, to express my regret and anguish, to pray to him that he may appear. Something about this satyr, his calm demeanor, his gentle chuckle, and goat-like eyes warmed me. He wished me farewell and played a pan flute for his friend. They danced together into the wilderness. I headed off on my own, determined to walk. On and on, I looked for an altar, places for sacrifice and prayer. I was hoping to see a temple, but when I found a shrine, I figured it would suffice. In the forest, a tiny shrine to the goddess Demeter. There was a monument dedicated to her, complete with harvest offerings. Wheat and barley, seeds and nuts, fruits and vegetables with lit candles. However, dust and filth were covering the surfaces. I took a time to tidy the house up. I cleaned the filth from the stones and kneeled to pray when everything was in order. But I didn't hear anything. No indication at all. There are no flickering flames or wings among the foliage. No animals could be heard while masked. Just silent. I suspected she was terrified of Aphrodite. Eros must have already raced to her. I rested at Demeter's altar till the next morning. Praying to Eros yielded no consequence. The following day, I wandered across additional territories alone but for the animals and plants, until the horizon was filled with smoke and a city I recognized emerged in front of me. I'd heard a lot about this site, but had only seen it once before. I had attended my sister's wedding because here was the place where her husband lived. Anger, betrayal, and obsession dominated my thoughts. They had caused this. My sisters had implanted the precise notions in my mind that cost me everything. My boyfriend had been correct, but I wanted to believe differently. I designed a test for my sister, our family's middle child. I rushed to her house in tears, requested to see her, and instantly blurted out the awful sequence of events. How she gasped at the true truth. No beast, only the god of love and want. The most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen. How her eyes expanded. I told her the story till my husband woke up. No word was a lie yet. I effortlessly weaved in the fiction alongside the reality. I told my sister in a sorrowful tone that Eros, the god of love, had cast me out and decided that we were no longer married. He intended to marry one of my sisters. She must travel to the cliffs, and Zephyrus will securely transport her to her new existence. The palace and territories were hers to rule as Eros's bride. I wanted her to console me, label him a monster, and offer me rest and a place to stay. But she ran. She did not say farewell to me or her husband, but instead instructed the servant to prepare a horse. I left her place, feeling even more disappointed. But I moved on since it wasn't simply my life anymore. I want the father of my child to know how sorry I am. Then there's a chance my child won't be cursed by the gods. I muttered these prayers to my love as I went pleading for forgiveness, misinterpreting purpose, and pledging to be faithful. I knew he probably wouldn't listen, but I had to try. I liked him before the arrow, and much more afterward. I cared so deeply about him that it was beyond words. My light and love were what kept me going. I traveled long till I came upon a temple that was larger than the tiny shrine from before. It was a temple dedicated to the powerful goddess Hera. I prayed again, but all my words were lost in the wind, blown away, unanswered, and quiet. I strolled into the darkness and discovered a second city. Luck would reveal that it was home to my other sister, the eldest of us all. I prayed she wouldn't fail me either. So I tried my luck. I gave her the same narrative with the beast representing the magnificent deity Eros, as well as the trap to test her. But she followed suit. The liar dashed right to the cliff's brink, presumably to receive her prize. I worried whether she would see our sister's body as she dropped to join her at the bottom. Zephyrus exclusively obeyed Eros's commands. He would not capture them now that he was gone. They would simply fall. But my eldest sister was already tripping over her own skirts, so I doubted she'd see her before it was too late. It was fantastic to learn their real colors. In a way, I saw it as them sealing their own destiny, watching them fall for my falsehoods after so readily falling for theirs. I left her castle as she did and walked her city streets, but I found them lacking. Tired faces, overworked and hungry. These cities appeared worse than anything my sisters had stated, and so unlike our fathers. Though I rarely left our house to mingle with the locals, I recalled the streets of home. Our people were the happiest here. None were as forlorn as those before me. I couldn't handle it. I went into a back alley to take a breather. From there, I could hear throngs gathering, causing the streets to buzz. One noise was louder than the others. A loud voice rises over the mortal conversation. It was a windfall for me. Hermes, the messenger deity, had been summoned to deliver the news. I saw him go into the skies above. No doubt, to the next city to further distribute the warrant for my arrest. Aphrodite searched for me. Anyone who approached me and chatted would be rewarded. I stole a cloak and pulled the hood up. But where would my Eros go? Naturally, he is referring to his mother. If she wanted to reward people who discovered me, how would she react if I handed myself in? If there was any chance of meeting him, I had to go. But I'd need to catch her attention. Mortals cannot enter the gods' kingdoms. We can't even see their genuine residences without authorization. So, I strolled toward an Aphrodite temple. There I knelt, prayed, sacrificed, and waited. Smoke swirled around me, and everything got hazy. When I opened my eyes, I was kneeling in front of large wood doors. The embellished entryway has delicately carved wood as well as gorgeous flowers and birds. They yanked open, and a brilliant light struck my eyes. An arm gripped mine, and I was led inside. The room was illuminated by soft pink and orange lights. It was covered in sumptuous textiles, and strong smells permeated the air. Thick, flowery fragrances assailed the senses. I was dragged through passageways filled with nymphs, satyrs, and naiads, until the hand that was hauling me dropped me on the cold stone floor. I yelped in pain, and laughter rang about me. Habit's hand has released grip of me. Sorrow and melancholy emerged beside them. They shoved me down, grabbed my limbs, and pulled. I kept falling into the stone while attempting to stand. They taunted me from above. Voices chattered and anguish gripped me. A clap rang over us all, and there was quiet. I raised my shaky head as a person cut through the gathering. They all parted for her. She was amazing, too wonderful to explain. Nobody could compare to her. Her complexion was golden and lovely, yet her eyes were brilliant, but filled with hatred. Disgust and rage surged through me, and I shrank away from her. I broke her furious gaze and focused on the tiles on the floor, curled into a ball and covering myself as if hiding would make me disappear. Her voice sounded like a choir of bells, melodious but overpowering. It left me in discomfort, and my ears were still ringing. I didn't comprehend her loud speech, but I could feel her henchman's fists. Punch after punch, she clapped again. I was still crushed on the floor, arms wrapped about my tummy, weeping hard. I attempted to concentrate on her words, her venom and mockery, when she spoke my name. So, here is the mortal female that my kid fell for. The one who received my admiration. This mindset is not beautiful. She is pitiful. I couldn't help but agree with her, but I remained mute. Her lackey circled me as she proceeded to humiliate me, humiliating and tearing apart my existence. Numerous disparaging remarks regarding my appearance, mortal state, and lack of affection. I tried not to care, but she laughed at my child. It was a lie that they would be a disgrace to my marriage. Mortal and heavenly cannot be married. It was a farce like having a fish and a bird together. Who was present during this ceremony? There are no witnesses, no family. There was no actual marriage. The masses surrounding me repeatedly branded my child a bastard. I tried not to show them my tears, to ignore them, but the goddess of beauty and love refused to be ignored. She drew me up from the floor, and I met her enchanted gaze. Aphrodite examined my face, tears stained and damaged as I was terrified and unable to comprehend her. The fire in her eyes became stronger, and she dropped me hard on the floor. She said to the masses in her court, "Who could ever love me for my beauty or lack thereof? I must have earned their affection in other ways, especially after rejecting her own son." Aphrodite went quiet. In the stillness, I requested if I might see him beg forgiveness and confess for my crimes, since all I wanted was to face my penalties and gain an audience with my husband. I believed that my flattery, pleading, and groveling would be enough to satisfy her. But her bell-like laughing resumed, and the masses joined in. I bowed my head and waited. She extended her hands in front of her, and seeds sprouted from her open palms and dropped to the ground. Cascades of wheat, barley, millet, and poppies. They poured from her palms like water, and more filled the room. I noticed chickpeas, lentils, and beans spreading across the floorboards between the legs of the guests. Aphrodite closed her hands, and the seeds ceased. The stack covered the majority of the mosaic in the hall. She raised her head, and the entire audience appeared to lean toward her, ready to hear her words. She proclaimed a series of trials to put me to the test as a brave mortal seeking the favor of the gods. I need to establish my value, and these seeds will be the beginning of my difficulties. If I pass the goddess's trials, I might present my case to Eros. I would have the opportunity to communicate with him. I grabbed upon this and was filled with optimism. On the next morning, at first light, I would begin arranging the confused heaps. The task was to sort the jumbles and split them into heaps of the same type. If I failed before Aphrodite arrived at sunset, I would leave Eros to recuperate from the devastation I had inflicted. I was to return to the mortal realm and slip into obscurity. But following this spectacular pronouncement, Aphrodite directed me to a chamber across the home out of sight. Melancholy led me to the chamber beside the cellar and shut me within. Outside, the godly continued to eat and rejoice. I was confined in that cold little chamber, and all I could think about was Eros. I tried praying and reaching out to him, but there was no answer. Nevertheless, I prayed much of the night. I tried the door, but no matter how hard I pushed it, stayed stuck. So I sat on the stone and continued to pray until I fell asleep. The next day, I was startled awake by a thud. I heard the latch click, and the door swung open. Aphrodite, dressed in a magnificent robe, stood in the doorway. She raised her head and peered down her nose at me. Her gaze was too strong for my eyes, so I concentrated on her robes instead. The cloth was light pink and shimmering, moving like water and catching the sun. Without speaking, she turned and proceeded down the corridor. I jumped to my feet and followed. She seemed to soar with elegance as I plodded alongside her. We walked back to the hall with the mounds of seeds. She repeated her directions, but more quietly. Without her audience to soften her tone, she spoke with clenched teeth. She hurriedly departed, slamming the wooden doors behind her. I knelt and began to work. I collected baskets and sorted through the stacks. Mind-numbing and fiddly job. As the skies brightened, my gaze shifted, and I looked up to see it was midday. I'd labored for hours and barely sorted a few meters of floor before me. This is when terror and despair set in. I grasped the technique for the assignment she had assigned me. It wasn't feasible. It is not up to me to tidy up the entire hall before sunset. If I had a week or two, I could do it on my own. But given my current rate of progress, I would not be able to complete it on time. And I'd fail. I attempted to sort quicker, but my hands shook from anxiety. I fumbled and dropped. My vision got clouded. I peered into the corridors of the hall, but they were all vacant. All the locks were secured. It had been really packed yesterday, but now it was barren. I felt like the only one in the home. My illusion came tumbling down then. Sorting the seeds appeared to be a straightforward procedure. I even thought it was kind. However, the compassion was found to be a deception. Another betrayal. With my sister's treachery, the death of my husband, the anguish in my body, and the tiredness of it all. All of my dreams were scattered and crushed. My never-ending and exhausting passion for Eros. Each optimism became to despair, and I burst into tears. I wanted to be tough and never give up, but I was only a person, against powers beyond my control, the very will of the gods. There was nothing to do but weep. My tears produced their own puddle amid the seeds. With all the tears, I could hardly see the thousands of seeds. I heaved and cried, swallowing it all. But I was not really alone. As I lay on the stone floor, little animals started to move out of sight. At first, I didn't see them, too caught up with myself. Then I assumed the seeds were moving by themselves. Different ones began to march across the floor to various areas of the room. When I peered closer, I saw a swarm of ants rather than the seeds. They came from the crevices in the stone mosaics and rose from the floor. I wiped my tears and sat up to observe them. More and more people arrived, each picking up a single seed and walking to the various mounds moving. I couldn't believe my eyes. The work was completed in only an hour. Everything had been sorted, organized, and made flawless. The ants did not speak with me or make a sign. I almost expected them to talk quietly to me, but they finished their task and did not linger. They retreated softly into the holes from whence they had come. I swept the hall from center to edge where the heaps were. Wheat, barley, millet, poppy seed, chickpeas, lentils, and beans all neatly piled. My hopes were rekindled. With renewed zeal, I glanced to the horizon. Whereas I had desired for the day to slow, I now yearned for evening to arrive sooner. I wished for the sun to set and to see her form go toward the door. I thought of Eros. He would be present somewhere in these halls. With some free time, I tried each door again. None had responded to my touch. None had opened, and none of my pleas had been heard. I wrung my hands against the wall's soft materials, and they reset themselves. The drapery is righting itself like a soldier rising to attention. Not a single wrinkle was out of place or different from the previous one. It was the softest cloth I'd ever touched, and I was a princess before this. I remembered how smooth my husband's skin felt, as well as the calluses on Eros's hands from using his bow and arrows. The door across the hall banged open. The wooden sculptures shattered and bounced off the stone walls. Aphrodite was home, and she smirked. But it plummeted, leaving her exquisite features crumpled up. Initially, there was astonishment and perplexity, followed by disdain. She marched into the center of the hall, her lackeys by her sides. Her eyes raced from one pile to the next until falling on me. Her glare cut through me, and I could see the seething wrath in her eyes. My body told me to crouch, surrender to her, or flee. So I knelt and bent my head, offering the goddess the proper reverence. I thought it would change her perplexing rage and conceal my own horror. She complimented me with clenched teeth, pulled her mask back on, and dropped a crust of bread on the floor. I heard her footsteps leave, and the door banged shut again. The lackey's sadness and melancholy cackled as they brought me back to the storage from earlier. I was scared she'd assign me countless jobs, keeping me away from Eros. I slept poorly, worried about the morrow. Aphrodite's scream startled me up, and she called my name, leaving me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Sweat beaded on my hands as I lifted myself off the tile. Melancholy welcomed me at the entrance and led me to Aphrodite's gardens. She waited there, overlooking the lowlands below, which had a river and an exquisite green environment. Birds soared overhead, but Aphrodite pointed to the verdant meadows, directing my attention to a group grazing there. Sheep were simple in all, save their fleece, which sparkled in the sun like molten gold. I was in awe of the golden fleece when I felt a hand rest on my shoulder. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck spring up, and I ventured to gaze at the goddess. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen Eros's divinity given his overwhelming might. Her face was plastered with a mischievous smile, which I assumed was real at the time. Aphrodite went on to kindly describe the second assignment, leading me to believe it was straightforward. Just like previously, the instructions were clear. Get some fleece from the golden sheep and return it before midnight. But like with the last job, I expected an impossible catch. But I smiled back at her sheepishly. I accepted the basket she pushed in my hands and descended to the valleys below. I stood in the fields, watching the flocks from a distance, trying to figure out what the mission was. I stayed along the riverbank and waited in the shelter of the trees. From my vantage point, I observed a lone wolf descend. There were no fences or gates to safeguard the herd. There did not appear to be a shepherd, and thus the wolf chose its prey. It swirled around a tiny one, exploring the margins. However, as it attempted to strike, the sheep turned and charged. Horns sprang from its head in an instant. It smashed against and punctured the wolf. Blood flowed out, and the wolf howled in anguish. As the sheep backed away, the wolf's skin and entrails stuck to its horns, and they were dragged out, spilled all over the grass, ruining everything. The wolf abruptly ceased howling after that. The sheep's horns sank back as if they had never grown at all. It returned to graze, avoiding the wolf's gored body in search of new grass. It clicked into place. She had intended for me to die, to be slain like a wolf. I walked to the water disturbed by what I'd witnessed. I cleaned my face in the chilly water and tried to figure out how to acquire that fleece. But as I thought, nothing came to mind. Just pictures of the wolf, my mind substituting its fur with my own belly, and my intestines spilled across the grass. I felt nauseous. I sat for a long time, far into the afternoon, and the light started to fade. All of the plans and concepts I had considered, neither of them would work. Climbing a tree to approach them from above, none of the sheep were grazing along the tree line, waiting for them to come to the river for water. No. Even so, they may simply turn and charge at me. I couldn't help it. I was so irritated that tears welled up in my eyes. I sat by the river and added to its waters, losing thoughts in the sunlight. I became enraged and struck the water, splashing them about till I heard whispering, a bizarre voice emanating from no source. It seems impossible. But as I looked and listened, I realized it was coming from a reed growing in the river. The quiet words soothed and calmed me. The voice directed me to gaze beyond the hill. Where the sheep were permitted to roam, they investigated the entire region. They really appreciated the berries from the bramble bushes that were hidden away. I wiped my tears, listened to everything from the reed, and proceeded to the concealed brambles that the voice said. There were scarcely any berries left, but there were piles of golden fleece amid the thorns, because when they ate the fruit, it would easily get stuck and dangle on the sharp spikes. I took the clumps of wool and filled the basket easily. The sunset was gorgeous and illuminated my walk back to Aphrodite's. But as I approached the doors, I paused, reminded of her rage. I knew she wouldn't be thrilled with the outcome. I did my best to close. Myself took a long breath and knocked. Melancholy responded, her small eyes narrowing as she gazed at me in the basket. She flung the door open, and I noticed the feast they were enjoying. Dish after dish, mugs of dark red wine everywhere, music and laughter. I made my way through the masses, hugging the basket tight, until I found myself back in front of Aphrodite. She raised her hand, and everyone went silent. I knelt and laid the basket at her feet. She smiled tightly. I noticed her sigh. I felt her huff, and she sent me away again. But before any of her minions could lead me away, I spoke up. I said it beforehand. I'd finished 2 chores. How many more may the goddess provide before I am proven worthy? Her eyes darkened, and she jerked forward before focusing on the audience. She then sat back and relaxed on her throne. For every 2 finished, you will receive 2 more. That's all, Psyche. Get away of my sight. 2 more difficulties, and I'd already done 2 impossible things. I slept a bit better that night, but my murmured prayers to Eros lasted until I fell asleep. The next morning, I was confined in the room until noon. I could hear Aphrodite and her followers' voices, but couldn't figure out what they were saying. She sounded irritated. I was crushed up against the door as it sprang open. I nearly fell to the floor, but grabbed myself just in time. Misery dragged me back down the corridor, not allowing me to stand up. I was brought before Aphrodite again. This time, she marched to a balcony, pushing me behind her. She raised her hand and twisted her wrist, revealing a pure crystal chalice. She placed it in my hands and pointed to a tall peak. I noticed a black stream coming from the top. It cascaded down the mountain to a rock wall. It proceeded on and plummeted into a chasm, an abyssal hole in the earth that appeared to have no end. The goddess instructed me to fill the vessel with its waters, but just water from the beginning, and to return before the following sunrise. She didn't identify the river, but I recognized it by its color, the way her lackeys stared at each other, covering their smirks, and the plunge into the darkness. This was no ordinary stream. It was the birthplace, the source of the river that flowed into the underworld. That was the river Styx. But I did not tell them I knew. I grinned as I moved my aching body toward the mountain. As I did, I retold the memories of my youth again and over. Any mention of this river was important, and I remembered the gods of its source. Snakes that never looked away, dragons with stretched necks and snapping jaws. I climbed as high as I could. The closer I approached, the more I heard sounds not from the creatures surrounding me, but from the boulders splashing in the murky waters. Strange queries and cautions, brief and sharp at first, advising me to leave and go while I could. But when I drew closer, they issued lengthier cautions. Who are you? What is your game? You'll never make it. Turn back or confront the animals. How are you going to attain your goal? There is nowhere else to walk. The voices were correct as the trail in the mountain reached a cliffside, a plummet into the darkness. I noticed the reflective eyeballs down there hissing and snapping. I couldn't leap across or climb much higher, and I was too far from the spring's source. I had no alternatives left. It was either climb down and accept defeat, or leap and succumb to the monsters or the plummet. There was no answer, no method to do this duty. I gazed down at the chalice and considered filling it with my tears. It was the best hope I had, but she would recognize the difference. As I turned to toss it into the gap, I raised my arm and a squawk echoed overhead. It terrified me and made me jump. I dropped the crystal cup, which went off the edge. Then I felt a rush of air strike my face and saw the feathers of a bird fly by. It was plunging rapidly through the air, pursuing the glinting crystal. It soared with accuracy, grabbing the cup in its claws before turning away. It soared back to me, and I could tell it was a large eagle. Its feathers were vibrant in color, with gold glinting ends. It landed in front of me with wingspan larger than any other bird I'd ever seen. It stood almost half my height. As we locked eyes, I heard it speak to my thoughts. It warned me not to be scared. It had come to help me at the request of its lord Styx. Styx was a mighty river where the gods swore their oaths. No mortal could touch it without consequences, but the eagle was willing to fly beyond the snakes and dragon fangs to the top of the mountain far beyond where I could go and gather its black waters for me. It took off from the cliff before I could say thank you. A burst of wind hit me again, and all I could do was wait while it went up into the sky beyond my reach. The sun had set, and the night was becoming cooler. I heard hisses and roars both above and below. The eagle burst through the clouds, again flapping its wings. It landed as it had previously, but more cautiously, and offered the crystal chalice held aloft with its beak. I grinned and thanked the bird as I took the dark flowing liquid from him, which was filled to the brim. I thanked it several times and inquired about its voyage and the noises I had heard, and the bird's weird voice within my brain informed me about its arguments with the snakes and dragons. He attempted to fly through, but they snapped and barred his route, so he lied and said Aphrodite had instructed him. They dipped out of his way, allowing him to fill the cup easily. I felt arrogant and satisfied as I returned to her house. She would undoubtedly freak out if she saw me still living. Only one step away from my love, and I still had the entire night to make it back. When I returned to Aphrodite's mansion, the stars were still high in the sky, and her court was in a drunken slumber. Several walls were adorned with silver mirrors and lavish textiles. The whole court was clutching full glasses with several empty containers thrown over the floor. Many of them admired their own reflections, including the goddess of beauty herself, sighing and staring at herself as she brushed her hair, giggling with her flock, until she noticed my shadow over her shoulder, and her eyes returned to the familiar wrath I had grown to know. Her jaw tightened and her face darkened. It grew increasingly serious. When the music stopped, everyone quiet, and turned to stare at me. I gently carried the chalice, keeping my head held high. I paused before her throne and set it at her feet. I sank on my knees and dipped my head in reverence. I said nothing. She groaned, no longer bothered about her disguise, and instructed me to go. My final assignment would arrive tomorrow. As I turned to go, I felt something speed past my ear, the sound of shattered glass and water splashing on the stone. She'd flung the chalice toward the wall. The surface blazed and sizzled where the water contacted it, but I didn't flinch. I continued going, locked the doors behind me, and rested, relieved that I had made it through another day. Courageous enough to explore the passageways and attempt the locks on each one again. I had been down numerous without success before turning a corner and saw two familiar faces. Melancholy and grief stood guard at an elaborate doorway. I knew that was his room. My spouse Eros lay beyond the door, but I did not want another pounding. I withdrew to my cupboard. After ascending a mountain, my legs and arms suffer. I'd need to rest if I was to finish the ultimate duty, whatever it was. I slept soundly that night. Hope has once again warmed my heart. The next morning, I awoke at dawn, waiting for the door to open, anxious to do the final chore. But Aphrodite made me wait again. This time, she came to collect me by herself. With a tight smile on her face, she commended me on my achievements thus far. But she was plainly frustrated that I had done so well. The serpentine narrowing of her eyes, along with her grin, made me nervous. She wouldn't assign me an easy work. This would be the absolute worst. She led me to her hallway and showed me an empty box. The casing was made of solid gold and had engravings of doves, sparrows, and swans. It contained the leftovers of a glittering iridescent cream, her special cosmetic product. She grumbled that it had all been spent to massage and relax Eros. His flesh was still recovering from the burns I made. I discovered out later that she had lied. Eros had already been cured and was kept under lock and key, focusing on emotional rather than physical wounds. Even then, I wondered how hot oil could damage a deity. His wounds should not have lasted long enough to cause him pain. But I did believe her. It was a cunning dagger intended to inflict more harm on me. She said that she had used up all of her supplies to cure her kid and had none left for herself. She was moaning about how tired she was, despite the fact that she looked as fresh as morning dew. Aphrodite, no less gorgeous than the day before, informed me of my final job. It was to deliver the little box to Persephone, the goddess of spring and ruler of the underworld, and return part of her beauty cream to compensate for the loss. That was all. Travel to the underworld and return. I questioned her. How can I, a mortal, get to the underworld? She laughed in my face. Use your wits, she spat. This is your duty and yours alone. I am not going to assist you fix it. It is up to you. I took the box and marched away from her house first toward the abyss, a hole that led into darkness where Styx's source flowed. But before I could scale the mountain, I noticed a big tower on the brink of the plunge. It was the only option I could think of. I may fall and drown or be dashed over the rocks, but it is one way to join the underworld. I didn't know any others. The ivory tower had hundreds of stairs, yet it was less steep than the mountain cliff. I couldn't give up and didn't have any other plans. So I ascended to the very top. After hours of sweating, I made it to the top. I moved to the edge of the top floor balcony and heard the river's whispers again leave, run, and go. But suddenly, another voice, distinct from the water, spoke forth. Stop, Psyche. You should not leap. As I turned, I couldn't see any people or animals that may have been the cause. It came from inside the tower, as if the walls were speaking for themselves. I stepped toward the wall and away from the edge. The voice felt warm and familiar, like the reed from earlier. I put it out of my thoughts and listened to the tower continue. You cannot enter the underworld from here. If you fall from this height, you will die and be unable to return to the world of the living. It's another trick, Psyche. You will succeed in this endeavor if you listen to me and carefully follow my directions. There is an entryway similar to many hidden portals to the underworld on Earth not far from here. You can enter from there, as there is a cave beside a waterfall. Find the darkest stone on the wall, which has been feathered by the light. You must walk directly through the hard stone. It's a gateway. You will reach Hades' beaches via a craggy rock. However, the domain of the dead is perilous, and Aphrodite dislikes losing. You must plan for your travel. 2 gold coins are required, 1 for your fare over the Styx River, and 1 for your return. Make sure Charon gets the coins from you personally. Next, prepare wine-soaked and honey-baked barley cakes. They are Cerberus's favorite delicacies, and he will only let you pass for this price. 2 are required. 1 for the travel there, and 1 for the journey back. There will be tactics set up to take the cash and pastries. Whether you put them down or they plead for them, you must not give up. You must not delay. Do not talk with anyone. Everything is a ruse. Spirits on the river will plead to be allowed aboard Charon's boat. Souls wandering on the other side will plead for your assistance. You must walk. Ignore them all until you've reached Hades' palace. There are additional traps to dodge. Persephone will provide a delicious feast, a comfy spot to sit, and the softest bed for sleep. But do not succumb to their temptations. If you consume the underworld's food, you will be bound there forever. Sit on the floor, drinking nothing but water and a piece of stale bread. You must drink and sit while complimenting her flowers. She is proud of them which can help you get favor. Then, you must explain your task and ask for her beauty cream. Once you have it, you must return along the path you took. The most crucial thing you must remember is to not open the package. Bring it right back, and you'll succeed and see your love again. I listened to every word, believing the voice from the tower. I proceeded across the land, precisely where the tower said, and discovered the cave. Aphrodite had not set a time restriction, so I paused to prepare for the expedition. I slept in the cave and went to a hamlet to get the goods and currency I needed. Within a day, I felt relaxed and slightly healed. I decided I was ready after securing the money and baking the cakes. I approached the deepest cave wall and walked straight through it. It was like falling. I can't exactly recollect what I saw. I recall colors and forms. Things blurred together until they were one, followed by darkness. I landed on dark sand and glanced out into the horizon. The underworld was not what I had expected. It was far bigger than I had expected. Shades and spirits lined the coastline waiting. Styx appeared considerably black than in the mortal world, a dark inkiness that absorbed the light. I now knew what people meant when they talked about Stygian seas. Across the river, I noticed it. Hades' realms are my next destination. I strolled along the coastline, clutching the cakes and cash firmly in my fists. The poor soul's cries terrified me, so I attempted to maintain my way. But then I noticed a number of people huddled together. As I looked around, I noticed that everyone was walking in the same direction toward the throng, so I followed them, expecting to locate the ferryman. As a mortal amid ghosts, I could walk right through them. However, it left me feeling terrible in my stomach. My brain is foggy, and my bones hurt. I attempted to move past them, but the crowd was too dense. I took a deep breath and dashed among them, clutching my illness in my gut and searching for the boat. As I dashed to the opposite side, I noticed it as it approached the shore. Charon is at its helm. He wore his hood up, and his face was concealed. Looking at him sent shivers down my spine. His garments were soaked with sand at the edges, and his hands were lean and ragged. But I removed my first obelisk and put it in my mouth. He took the fur himself and motioned me aboard his ship. I waited until he collected the coins from each soul and shade. Those without began to plead and scratch at his boat, while some forcibly prevented them from coming aboard. When the boat was full, he grabbed up his long staff, which changed into an oar, and began steering the boat. We sailed out into the river, and I observed the water. Thicker than earth's seas and darker than the liquid in the crystal chalice delivered to me by the eagle. It moved in a way that no other river I know did. We crossed big stones and got closer to the land on the other side. Pale skull forms emerged just beneath the waves. They bounced up and down, dipped into the water, and one head stood out above the others. An elderly guy with a long face, empty and haggard, transparent, yet his eyes shone dazzling white as he opened them. I felt myself leaning in to look. His eyes met mine, and a hand emerged from the water. I jerked back as his fingers clawed at the boat's edge, and suddenly his entire head appeared. He begged and scratched against the boat's side, his voice raspy and strained. There was a deep incision across his throat. The skin flaps opened, revealing the cables and threads of his muscles beneath. I closed my eyes, trying not to vomit. I hid my ears from his sobbing and disregarded his splashing hand. My hands clenched, which did not help, even though instinct prompted me to assist him. Take his hand and pull him on, I couldn't. I recalled Eros, and the gloom terrified me. Instead, I looked to the next beach and waited, although I could still see him in the corner of my eye. It took some time for him to fall back into the river, and much longer for us to reach the opposite bank. When we arrived, I let the other spirits to exit first. I didn't want to go through them again if I could avoid it. I followed the souls as they walked towards the gates when I beheld the Hound of Hell for the first time. Kerberos loomed towering above us all, his 3 heads looking in different directions and ever attentive. His fangs were bared with each head, and one began to snarl. For 2 spirits attempted to push past the gates. They cried about unjust judgment and their desire to flee to be free from Hades. But Kerberos snarled and hissed with 2 heads, his teeth snapping down. He swung his heads together, and the spirits flew across the bleak skies before settling beyond the gates. I was anxious as I attempted to fit in with the spirits surrounding me, but my skin was not transparent. My spirit remained tied to my live flesh, and I was immediately smelled. I froze when the guard's gaze fell on me. Kerberos's heads fell low, one facing me directly, and the other 2 encircling both my sides. His sniffing nostrils fanned hot air over my entire body, yet he didn't snarl. He didn't bark. He did not unhinge his jaws and swallow me completely. His mouth dropped wide, and drool pooled around the corners. I'd frozen at the beast's enormity. Despite all the stories I'd heard, I hadn't anticipated him to be this huge. But Kerberos's eyes softened as he waited. His nostrils probed more curiously now, and they detected an enticing aroma. I then grabbed 1 honeyed barley biscuit from my palm and divided it in 3. I tossed the pieces at each head and dashed towards the gate as they chewed. When I looked back, his tail was wagging joyously. His attention was focused on the spirits behind me. I slowed down to gather my breath and continued walking. Through the dazzling gates of adamant past the halls of judgment, with the legendary 3 kings beyond the dungeon doors and into the lands. Through the flower fields and the spirits who walk there, I grasped the cake and the obelisks, my link to the earthly realm. I came upon a man with bundles of sticks. He urged me to pick up a few. He had dropped assist them and set them on the pile with his full arms. But I didn't stop. I just walked past. As the masses of humanity dispersed, I noticed a castle in the horizon. As I got closer, trekking for hours in the gloomy landscape, I came upon a gathering of ladies. They were all sitting behind looms, creating tapestries. They offered me to sit and weave with them. One weaver turned holding tangled threads and wool. The confusion and anguish in her eyes reminded me of my own grandma. How she had lost all of her talents in old age and had began to forget. As a youngster, I used to sit by her side and assist her untangle the yarn. We'd do it together and watch Mom weave. In the dim light, the spirit's visage appeared to mirror her own. I paused for a time, buried in my recollections. She attempted to reach into my hands and insert the wool, maybe removing the coin and cake. But I stepped backward, keeping my clenched fists close to my chest. Squeezing the coin too firmly, I felt it bite my hand. My own nails dug and sank into my skin, leaving moon-shaped wounds. But I didn't let go. I moved away as the ladies began to yell after me, imploring me to return, before screaming, insulting, and terrifying me with their words and intensity. It drove me even more, and I rushed to the castle. This was not what I had pictured for the god of the dead's home. His kingdom was brightly lit, with gold and diamonds embedded in the walls. Plants and flowers adorned every table. It was open and welcoming, even inviting big and regal and little terrifying. I was halted by a mysterious figure. My eyes only saw smoke shaped like a guy. He stopped in front of me without saying anything and lifted his arm to gesture down the corridor. He drifted toward it, and I did what I imagined he wanted me to do. We traveled through hallways and corridors, past pillars and plants, until we came to a stand in front of big double doors. The smoke guy raised his arms and pulled the wooden doors wide, exposing Hades' personal throne room. The smoke form vanished before my eyes, and I was left to walk in alone. Their hall was more magnificent than the rest of the palace, which seemed cramped, claustrophobic, and chilly. This place was different. Elegant flourishes, vividly colored flowers everywhere, and a solid stone covering it all. It spoke of age and strength, but not coldness. This place felt genuine. I moved towards the thrones and glanced up at the gods that sat there. Hades and Persephone, the underworld's ruler and queen. They had a gathering around them, so I approached gently. Hades conversed with people around him, who presented papers and appeared to be deeply engaged in conversation. I couldn't hear what it was about. Persephone was listening occasionally, interjecting, but less preoccupied. Someone stood by her side, whispering in her ear, and I realized it was the same smoke form that had led me here. The queen turned to gaze at me. I sank to my knees and bowed my head, grateful for her hospitality. She rose from her seat, and Hades paused his discussions to seize her hand. He kissed it, and she descended from their lofty pedestal towards me. She instructed me to follow. I wouldn't deny a goddess. We strolled through the hallways together. Persephone led me to a room with a big table and several chairs. She took the head of the table seat and requested me to sit next to her. Platters of food, fruits, and vegetables adorned the table. Cups of wine, both red and white, with diverse fruits of origin in rows behind. A full roast pig steaks and breads, soups, broths, and stews. Everything smelt wonderful and made my mouth wet. I had never seen so many foods. My travel had been lengthy, and I was almost starving. I would have sobbed if I had eaten only one grape. But I looked down. I closed my eyes and took a long breath, but it didn't help. I just smelled all of the food again. But I concentrated on the voice of the tower. I recall the words and respectfully rejected. I sat on the floor next to the table. I requested for simple water. I didn't even request the bread. I was too terrified of being trapped here. I sat with Persephone as she ate. She ate gingerly, and I studied every bite, trying to envision the sensations and flavors. She continued to serve excellently cooked delicacies, and the discomfort in my stomach worsened, but I still refused. It seemed like an eternity while she ate her full and inquired what I, a mortal girl, was doing in the country of the dead. I told her frankly that I came for love and wanted her assistance. She leant forward and inquired about my life, my story, who I was, and who was this love I had battled so hard to bring to their domain. And I admitted everything. I told her about my life, the people of my city, the prophecy, my family, my marriage, and all that came after, about my shadowy spouse, and how long it took me to fall in love with him, and about the unexpected revelation of his beauty. I still didn't understand why he wanted to hide himself from me. He was all I could have hoped for and more. Then I informed her about my losses, my family's betrayals, the difficult work and travel that led me to that castle. She appeared to appreciate my story and sympathized. Her face was far more open and expressive than Aphrodite's. She felt warmer too. When my story was over, I felt like I could talk to her and that we had an affection and connection. I then requested her for her aid in completing my final mission, which was to appease Aphrodite and reclaim my love. I placed the little golden case on the table next to her. She smiled, gave a quick nod, and proceeded to get the cream Aphrodite wanted. I was left alone in that large space, so I let myself breathe. It wasn't over yet, but I was so close. I began to mentally retrace my previous voyage. Persephone returned to the room and handed me the case with a stiff grin. I did not wait to observe how it plummeted. Instead, I bowed and departed their castle. Back in the underground, I felt more assured. One hand still holds the currency and cake, while the other holds the cream container. I hummed and whistled as I walked. I avoided staring at the ghosts and shades. They made me tremble. Looking at them for too long made my insides chilly and sorrowful. I wandered around the area where the weavers had been remaining out of earshot. I didn't want to face them again, but I knew I couldn't deviate too much from my former course. It was preferable to confront recognized risks than unknown horrors. Even though I knew what was coming, the trek back was no less challenging, for there were much more obstacles to overcome than on the way there. The man with the logs attempted to implore me again. Ignoring him was simple this time, but other ghosts in the field approached me. Men, women, and children of all ages surged at me. They didn't appear to notice me on the walk to the castle, but on the way back, it was as if I had turned on a light in a dark room. They were moths swarming to it. The spirits and shadows couldn't really touch me, but they strolled right through me, striking my body and then disappearing into the mists. Each one shouted and transformed me. My stomach illness and muscular problems reappeared just as they had previously. However, this time, the spirits exhausted my spirit. Pain, nausea, weakness, and screaming. Over and over, the shadows flew at and through me. I apologized, repeatedly, sobbed, and continued to walk. I informed them that I couldn't assist. They wouldn't listen. They didn't stop. I wanted to scream and put my hands over my ears to drown out their words. But the cake, the coin, and the golden container seemed more heavy in my hands. More continued arriving, each sapping more of my vitality and taking a bigger toll. Nonetheless, I stumbled on. Back in the fields, I dodged the ghosts by hiding among the thick grass and flowers, past the halls, rivers, and cellar doors filled with the moans of tormented souls, until I noticed the gate. Cerberus quickly approached my hand, licking the gift with its mouth. The remaining two gnashed their teeth, stretched and barking at the stolen treasure. I didn't remain to see, since all of the spirits at the gates attempted to grab me as well. I rushed past them, absorbing each hit, for Charon's boat was ready to depart the coast. Despite the fact that all of the fresh spirits had flooded from his ship, I continued on. I raced through them too. Sweat and filth on my skin, I threw my arms over the side of the boat. Sand plastered to half of my body. I exhaled a sigh of relief as he withdrew the penny from my lips. After a time, I hoisted myself onto his empty craft. I fell on my back and lay there exhausted, looking at the sky, my blood pouring into my ears and my pulse still beating. I rested the golden case on my chest and let my body to fall slack. I closed my eyes and felt the boat sway in the thick waves. Charon's kind hand guides us. I was terrified before, but Charon's stillness made me feel better now. There is no fear, no overbearingness, no awkwardness, only a tranquil presence. A corpse in the boat beside me, like an old acquaintance. With my eyes closed, I could imagine we were on a lake sailing off to fish for hours in an empty day. The cool case in my palm comforted me, but then the banging started. The boat rocked as hands and fingers clawed at its underbelly again. Heads splashed and groans erupted, asking anything to be allowed on. I clutched myself hard, hoping to keep myself together for a little longer. I took deep breaths and concentrated on my body, blocking out the outer world, just in and out. I didn't notice when the boat hit the land. Charon used his oar to gently touch the side of the wood, and I sat up to look at the shore. The sharp stone, not far away, left an imprint in the sands where I fell. My feet ached, but it felt nice to be back on firm ground. The chilly case was still heavy in my palm, and my little break on the boat had only helped slightly. All the spirits that had traveled through me had depleted me more than I knew. I wiped the perspiration from my brow and looked at my image in the dark mirror of Styx's waters. It scared me. I had never looked so tired. My hair was thin, oily, and wild from the wind. Purple bruise-like markings made my sunken eyes look more bloodshot. I appeared thinner skeleton and empty. The toll on me was obvious. The tension of everything. The first time I heard the prophecy, the marriage, the tasks, the loss, the hurt, the treachery, the voyage to the underworld. Everything had eaten me from the inside out, leaving me pallid and sick. Will Eros even recognize me? I wasn't the Psyche he knew, and I didn't think I could go on like this. I would not let him see me in this damaged state, not after he abandoned me like that in the trees. I wanted him to see me as I had changed, albeit for the better. I felt stronger, more confident, and ready to battle. Despite the fact that these hardships had put me to the test, I had overcome them. I would stand before him and demonstrate that I battled for him. How could he possibly fight for me if I looked like this? He wouldn't want to forgive me. How would he like to fight for me? The weight of the box was always on my mind. My blood beat in my hand, hot and chilly. When I had received it from Aphrodite, it had grown warm to my touch on the way, as most metals do, and was excruciatingly hot when I handed it over to Persephone. But when she returned it to me, it was very cold. Holding it felt like frost on my skin, unnaturally frigid. I imagined that the cream was infused with some heavenly magic chilling effect, which was part of the restoration of its power. It felt good in my hands, and the chilly sensation lingered even after I had held it for hours. No, it was longer, or what felt like days. In this domain, I struggled to keep track of time. I was more concerned with my aching body, which was fatigued, wounded, and in desperate need of relief, than with the cream box's strange quality. I reasoned that since Persephone had filled the entire case, Aphrodite wouldn't notice if I used a small amount. If I ran my finger over the lid for that smear of lotion that is seldom used or missed, I would walk toward the rock, toward the gateway. But my thoughts kept twisting, pulling me toward the box, presenting weak justifications to myself. I acknowledge that my wins had made me too brazen. With the conclusion in sight, I considered slighting the goddess even further, demonstrating that she had failed to shatter me, and that I, a simple mortal, had triumphed over her. The temptation was too great. I opened the gold casing. Black smoke erupted in a tornado, twirling with gray swirls that engulfed the light. It surged at me. Before I could react, it had covered my eyes and filled my nose and throat. It overtook me. I couldn't breathe or cough. I attempted to blink, but everything stopped. Everything vanished, and there was nothing. Just blackness. Psyche was fooled. My mother had prepared a trap that I hadn't seen coming. I'd attempted to warn her. She was correct. I had no unhealed wounds during the flight to Aphrodite's, and all bodily problems were receding, save for my heart. When I heard she was in the hall, I knew she was after me. I was still irritated. I retreated to my chamber nauseous at the thought of seeing her after what she had just done, but her prayers that first night. When I left, I was able to block out her voice with the prayers of others, although she was trapped only a few rooms away. I couldn't block her out. I tried, but her voice seemed to shout into my consciousness. I had no option but to listen. Aphrodite's lackeys were stationed at both of our doors, since I did not receive the pleasant reception I had anticipated. My mother knew everything. She was not happy, especially since I had defied directions. My mother no longer trusted me. She lied, of course. Always wearing a nice mask, she said it was for my health and safety, but it was all for her personal gain. My transgression in falling for the mortal she detested had hurt, but that was our way. We had deceived each other repeatedly. Nonetheless, my mother would like to chastise me personally. Her phony politeness are always used to tighten the leash. My mother pretended to be wounded on my behalf, claiming we hadn't heard about her personal hatred for the girl, and no one said anything. She rambled on about merely wanting to punish Psyche for the misery she had caused me, describing the burns and dagger as a thorough assassination attempt on a deity. Aphrodite's smile was broad and evil. She knew I couldn't disagree or fight with it. Zeus would agree with Aphrodite. Any god would. She ought to be made an example of. Even though she injured me, I did not want her death. In her prayers, I heard her justifications, her side of the story, her regrets and fears, and the destiny of her sisters who had paid the price for their misdeeds. She was here to fight for me. I wanted to forgive her, but my rage was still visible. I wanted to trust her, but I had to see it. I had previously trusted her, and she had disappointed me. I would never rely just on word of mouth again, but that smile of Aphrodite's spoke volumes. Death in one form or another. I had to stop her from carrying out an execution. I smiled mischievously and nodded in agreement with my mother. She was correct. Psyche needed to be punished, but why do it quickly? After all she'd done to me and to us, isn't it preferable to torment her first? Set her up for a series of increasingly severe tasks. Show her how worthless she is compared to the deity she attempted to replace. Better still, give her a false feeling of security. Give her hope via early achievement, then rip it away. It will sweeten her demise. It was so simple to revert to my knavish persona, presenting plans cloaked in flattery, and she ate it up. She quickly claimed the concept as her own, with some adjustments, of course. I knew she wanted to murder Psyche. This is why the seeds were planted, so that my mother might return home and murder herself. Aphrodite's goal was to flood the chamber with seeds signifying Psyche's stolen sacrifice so she may choke on them. In some ways, it was poetic, but my mother had not expected Psyche's endurance or my hand to tip the scales. I utilized my divinity and heavenly talents to make the ants adore Psyche. They sprang from the earth, fueled by it, to sift the seeds. When they were completed, I freed them from their love links, and they returned to their normal lives as ants. For the other jobs, I had heard her prayers, but had yet to pardon her. I wanted her to fight for me, yet here she was, facing unfathomable tasks and maybe lethal problems. I couldn't let Aphrodite destroy Psyche. I assisted her where I could just to level the playing field. Despite everything I had gone through, she had to come on the field to give my girl a fair shot. I was the voice within the reed, directing her away from the goring golden sheep. The eagle was not my creation. It was the tower from which she intended to fling herself. I was the voice emanating from within. She was courageous enough to jump. I admired her spirit. It was blossoming under strain, constantly lasting. And this is when I felt the flame of love return. It had never fully disappeared, but was overshadowed by rage and anguish. But her dedication to the difficulties, as well as her will and passion, were all intended for me. It made me want to trust her again. I told her the directions since I had heard my mother's scheme. I told her every step I could think of. I assumed I knew all of Aphrodite's tactics. I hadn't really won her over. She pretended acceptance, but did not believe my phony emotions to Psyche's successes. I didn't wear my mask like I used to, and she had the upper hand. I thought I was smarter than her. With her difficult duties being readily performed, it's understandable that she didn't trust me. But Aphrodite did not enjoy losing, so she devised a foolproof method to win for everyone. She'd written a message to Persephone and placed it in the empty box. The queen of the underworld liked a good romantic challenge. She did as she was told and poured no cream within only a black haze of sleep-filled death. When Psyche departed, Aphrodite began her celebrations early. It required a day of heavy drinking wine laced with ambrosia, and in her drunken condition, she began to boast about her victory, proclaiming the cunning twist of the message to the entire audience. I left immediately, wove through the mob to the closet window, and plunged. As I rushed to the entrance fast through the heavens, it was as if I could feel when the box opened and she dropped into darkness. Something exploded inside of me, sending adrenaline rushing through my veins and increasing my speed beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I soared to the cave in record time, burst through it, tucked my wings for a brief second to avoid clipping the stone, and slammed into the wall. It moved before my eyes, and I noticed her. It came to a stop beside my tracks. She was lying there motionless and cold. Her glazed eyes peered up into the sky, only meters from the gateway. I dove at her body and slammed into the sand. I hurried to stroke her cheek. As my flesh touched hers, I could feel the smoke throbbing and the terrible death seething within her. My body vibrated, and I focused my strength using my will to push and pull against the hurricane. I coaxed and tugged as if extracting venom from a wound. With concentration and a burst of light, the smoke flowed through the air like a stream. It surged and poured right back into the open waiting box within her. As it flowed between them, my gaze was always pulled inland to the horizon and the core of the underworld. There, I saw the three ladies and the destinies. She began by holding a spindle and feeding a thread into the second spinning wheel. The final of the three held sheets but stored them in a leather sheath. She took out the shining gold thread of perpetual life, the thread of the gods' lives, which is eternally weaved. They talked as one. This is the fate that you and the universe have determined. Let this be so. It is now. It will be, and has always been, the caterpillar. She has been in her chrysalis and will emerge as a butterfly. Bring her before the gods. She is, shall be, and has always been one of us. The vision of the fates vanished, and I glanced down as the smoke cleared. The box clicked shut behind it. At the same time, Psyche leaped into my arms with a rasping hold. Her eyes sprang out wide. I hugged her deeper and tighter than I ever had. I put my wings over both of us, protecting us from the world. We lingered there on the damp sands, breathing one other in. I leaned in to kiss her while she wept. I totally embraced her and carried her into the sky. Through the portal, I swirled us gently through the cave and back into the mortal world. Apollo noticed us in his chariot as we went by. Psyche grinned and waved as we flew towards the mountains. We descended from the skies to glide above the majestic Olympus. We flew into the palace, dashing past its columned hallways. We stormed into the royal room. I hovered above the masses and noticed that almost all of the gods had assembled. All except Aphrodite. We soared over them, landing at the foot of the throne stairs. I lowered Psyche to her feet as the ruler of the gods rose from his seat. She grabbed my arm to help me up, since I was still weak from the ordeal. I bowed low and implored Zeus to consider my cause. He grinned and nodded, a sparkle in his eyes. The court and the king both enjoyed a good narrative, so I recounted them the story of Eros and Psyche. From the minute I spotted her to how we flew to stand in front of them that day, Zeus grinned and chuckled. Who did we believe had dispatched the eagle? The entire court broke into laughing. Zeus roared out to everyone. Fate dictated that a new goddess be born today. He had followed our lives, encouraged our union, and witnessed the kindness and bravery in our hearts. A powerful, real love, determined to overcome the impossible. We had gone through it all together. He summoned a cupbearer to bring forth the ambrosia, and everyone rejoiced. Psyche seemed concerned, so I clasped her hand. I grasped the gold chalice. The liquid within radiated so brightly that the gold paled in contrast. I put the cup to Psyche's lips. As she sipped, a shine began to emerge from her skin. All of the wounds and sicknesses faded, gone. Within her, life was revived. The glow intensified until it became a dazzling white light that enveloped her entire body. It erupted like a wave across the room. Sparks are left to dance and fizzle in its wake. The courts let out a collective gasp and cheer. Psyche stood repaired and changed. Her beauty was same, but she now possessed authority. It oozed off her in huge waves. Her eyes were the only portion that remained radiant with brightness. 3 voices rang out of her. I am the goddess of mortal spirits. The radiance faded into her brown, yet gold particles lingered. She hugged me, and I heard it again. My Psyche's heart beat strongly and clearly, but it wasn't alone. The child's previous hummingbird patter. The kid was now returned to her previous state, maybe due to the power and will she now possessed. Zeus clapped, and the party started. There were lavish feasts and plenty of ambrosia. The week-long celebration includes food, games, and dancing. We followed the traditional wedding ceremonies and were wedded before the gods. Psyche and I had fun scheming to match folks during our inebriated days. After our wedding, joy transitioned into a pleasant routine. I returned to my mother and charmed and planned again, regaining her favor with mischief, trickery, and love for everyone. She couldn't resist gossip and lurid affairs, and quickly forgave me, as is customary. But her wrath with Psyche took longer. She regained many of her followers. She believes that the two beauty worshippers have all returned. But Psyche begged her city and all others who worshipped her in life to return to Aphrodite, the genuine embodiment of beauty. An olive branch lubricated the clogs, conveying both flattery and assurance. No, Aphrodite, my beloved mother-in-law. I would never claim such a position, and should never have let people deceive me. I was always destined for spirit. None could compare to your beauty, which is the best in the universe. Of course, she liked it. She cheerfully calls her daughter now, but this will come with time. Psyche and I returned to our house, where she always left a candle lit on the bedside even at night. She pledged that we would never be in darkness again. And the fate of our kid, our daughter, Hedone, is a story for another day.